All right, good evening, everyone. So, welcome to WWW, our Exaltius weekly Wednesday webinar. I hope everyone is able to see my screen right now. I am Shilpa. I'm a corporate trainer at Exaltius. So, for those who are hearing Exaltius for the first time, so we are in the edtech space. We enable, industry professionals and organizations with industry-ready skills in the AI space, cybersecurity, blockchain, software engineering, and a lot more. So, this today's webinar, we are continuing the AI Agents in Action at Workplace series this month. And what I will be walking you through today is this topic, as you can see here, AI Marketing Squad. So we will be building a multi-agent system today, completely from scratch. And that's going to enable us to build smarter digital campaign outputs. So let's get started. Okay, so first definition, what is a multi-agent system? We all know what's a single agent. I think so far we've seen a lot of examples and enablement of how to actually build a single agent workflow. It is just one AI node. So when we talk about our agentic AI tools, all of these agents are actually nodes. So there's just one node that's actually doing all of the heavy lifting. So it's doing in a digital marketing context, for example, right? Before you can actually publish a social media output, for example, this single node would be doing the entire heavy lifting in terms of doing the groundwork of researching, being able to write content and then reviewing and then doing the final, giving you the publish ready post. Yeah. So it's a lot of heavy lifting on just one single agent. Now, what's the value add of a multi-agent team? So as you can see, so it's not just one AI node here, it's a group of AI nodes. So each of them would specialize in one specific task only. So when we actually see the hands-on in a couple of minutes shortly, you will actually see that it's not just one AI node, it's a group of AI nodes. They have their work cut out for them. So we are going to have a central orchestrator that is going to be a supervisor node that is going to be calling upon individual worker AI nodes and delegating tasks to them. So we're going to construct our flow in this manner with one node to just do research, another node to take that research and then create a first pass content out of it, another node to be able to review that created content, and then finally one node to just give us the polished output to be able to post. So this whole thing that I just walked through simulates how an actual marketing team would be working. So that's the whole power of these multi-agent systems, because they mimic or they simulate how real work happens in business settings. And so to summarize, the whole shift here from a single agent to a multi-agent team is we're not just having one AI node, but we're going to have a group of AI nodes that are, coordinating and talking amongst each other like a real department to just, do one dedicated task. Yeah. Okay, now what we will be building today is we're going to take this scenario of a digital marketing manager at an agency. Now they have this task. There's a digital marketing summit that's coming up. Let me just get my pen here. Yeah, so there's a digital marketing summit that's coming up. And like all conferences, there are, LinkedIn posts that we like to post to market for these conferences. So there's early bird sign up, promotion available. We have a bunch of target audience, marketing managers, CMOs. So we have this, just these brief pieces, and instead of actually getting the whole flow done through an actual team, we are going to try and do it agentic way. So what we're going to do is we're going to assemble a team of AI nodes that are basically going to do this heavy lifting for us. What exactly? So we're going to have this central orchestrator node, a supervisor node, that is basically going to be the main person that is, or in this case, an AI node that is going to be coordinating work amongst all of these individual worker nodes that you see here. Yeah, so this is the flow that we are going to build. So all of this is enabled with just drag and drop. It's nothing complex. We're not going to be writing any code. So that's the beauty of the tool that we will be using, which I will talk about next. But this is the overview. This is the blueprint that I want you to have at the back of your mind as I go to the tool demo. So we're going to have a central supervisor node that is actually going to be orchestrating work amongst multiple worker nodes. So this researcher is our worker number one. So very similar to like, having employee number one. And then I'm going to have a content creator, employee number two. And then this is our worker node number three. And finally, the polished output creator, our campaign output generator node. So this is a structure that we're going to assemble shortly on Flowise. They all have their work cut out for them. So this brief gist that I've captured on the slide is going to be translated into system prompts that we're going to be putting into AI nodes inside our agentic AI platform, where we're going to construct this whole flow from scratch. So our researcher is going to gather market intel. Our content creator is going to use that intel and then create contents. Our reviewer is going to check if the post is publish ready. And then we're going to have the final polished output from the final node. So this is the whole idea that we're going to assemble shortly. Now, let me just clear this up. All right. So though this, we're going to assemble it in a non-coding manner. So we're using a no-code tool to be able to build this whole workflow. But there are some technical enablers that I also want to share before you actually see this come to life. And so these four building blocks that you see here are essential for us to be able to get this flow to life. So the first thing here is something called a flow state. So of course, these enablers are may differ another. So all of these terminologies are resonating with the tool that I'm using, which is Flowise. So first technical enabler is called flow state. So flow state is going to be what is going to let us have or establish the communication backbone through this whole workflow. As you can see, we need all of these nodes to talk to each other, very much like an actual team. So I need to have that communication channel established. That we're going to do with this thing called flow state, which I will show you shortly in the tool. We also need to kind of ensure that the supervisor, for example, has a restricted set of options to select from when it comes to which worker needs to go next. Like we only have these four employees here in this team. So we need to give visibility to the supervisor node that, okay, these are only your workers, please just pick from them. So we can enable that with these structured outputs that I'll also be showing you how to wire shortly. Of course, to have the whole context of who has done what and then who needs to go next and what do they need to do, I need to have the memory system established as well. All of this is just very simple, button enablement, toggling here and there on Flowise. But again, these are crucial components that basically are going to enable this flow to work. Lastly, every time a worker node finishes their work, they need to report back what is their output to the supervisor. So that's going to happen through this loop mechanism that also I'm going to show you on the tool shortly. All right. So with all of that, I think it's important to have a quick refresher about Flowise itself. Now, this tool, we have mentioned it a few times, introduced it in some of our webinars earlier. So just to recap, yeah, Flowise is an open source. It's a no-code agentic platform. So we can actually assemble agentic AI workflows from scratch. We don't need to write a single line of code on Flowise. So some capabilities of Flowise, it is completely open source. It has a very strong GitHub star, following. So I will later on after the webinar, I will be dropping the link to the Flowise web page. So you may want to come back to this video so you can actually grab that and then have your own setup done and look through the video again, and you can actually build this workflow on your own from scratch. Yeah. So I'm using the local installation. I'm using the local instance of Flowise. I'm not using the cloud one. So with the local instance, I can build unlimited number of flows and it actually stays secure inside my laptop. So that is the first thing. And again, this is a no-code platform, so we will be building it completely, visually. We're not going to be writing any programming over here. So the structure that I just walked you through the scenario, we are actually not just establishing one single AI node. We're going to have a group of AI nodes all, talking to each other, exchanging information amongst each other. So such a setup, very much like an actual business team, can be done very easily in Flowise. So that's what we're going to learn today. And time permitting, or I have the flow ready. I will actually show you as the next step or how to actually make this, take whatever flow I'm going to walk you through to the next level by, changing some of the nodes that we are going to be constructing. We'll be using LLM nodes, but you can actually swap that to agent nodes. With agent nodes, you actually get the power to integrate external tools into those AI nodes. So then that gives them access to live data. So that all of that is seamlessly enabled on Flowise. Yeah. So with that, actually, let's take the rest of the time, right, to actually build the workflow on Flowise. So let me actually now stop my sharing to the Flowise platform. Okay, so hopefully everyone is able to see my, let me just end this slideshow and I'll come back to it again. Okay, and show. All right, now, okay, so you should be looking at my Chrome page. Now, as I promised, I'll be dropping these links later on in the comments section of this video. So do come back and grab those so you can actually set this up from scratch and then you can have it, you can have the whole workflow constructed as well. Yeah, so this is Flowise's GitHub page. And since I'm using the local installation, I have some of this already done at my site. I have a Windows system. So on my, once you've done the installation one time, every time you go back to Flowise, you simply have to start it up. So I have it already done on my command prompt. And so you can actually see I ran this exact command, npx Flowise start. That is actually, you can grab it from their GitHub page. And then what happens is that once you actually kick this off, you can actually run the local instance of Flowise that looks like this. Yeah. So when you start Flowise, it's going to land you on this their platform. This is the the landing page. So what we are going to be building is the agent flow. So I'm going to just quickly toggle to agent flow. And you want to be on the new version. So this is the latest updated interface. So here I'm going to start off by creating a new flow. Yeah, so I'll just click on the add new. And that would bring us to this empty canvas in Flowise. So let me just put this all the way to the left here. Yeah. So this is the blank canvas on the Flowise interface. So whatever I just articulated on the slides, we're going to see that come to life here. And we're going to construct it here live on Flowise. Okay. So first, we are going to, give this flow a better name. So as you can see here, currently it's called Untitled Agent. So let me just rename that. So to do that, you have this, save over here. So let me just click on save. And then here I'm going to give this a representative name. Okay, so I'm just calling it digital marketing content team. So again, the goal here is to build this end-to-end multi-agent workflow. And it's going to be able to, given a particular ask, like I just give it some context of, okay, I need to create a LinkedIn post. It's for so-and-so audience. It's about a digital marketing conference. Can you do that for me? And it's going to go through this entire system of agents and then do that whole workflow for us. So let's actually start. Okay, now if you remember earlier, so I'm going to be referencing back to the slides. Now, over here, I did mention about the technical enablers. So let's actually start with this flow state, yeah? And where do we actually enable this? I've mentioned here that this is the communication backbone. This is what enables the communication between the different nodes. So how do I actually have that set up? So back to my Flowise, yeah? So in Flowise, there's a simple thing. Once you add a node, right, to configure it, you just double click. And so you actually go into that node and then you can actually start, you have access to all the different parameters or the settings for that particular node. So we can actually toggle them to create, certain, values. So right now what we're going to do is for those variables that I mentioned, yeah, so I need to have a way to set up a communication system between all of these nodes, the supervisor and then all the worker nodes. Now I do that inside my start node. I'm going to create two empty containers or empty variables. So to do that, inside the start node, I will click on add flow state, and then I'm going to name it. Okay, so I have the name here pre-configured. So I'm going to have one variable, one container, blank, empty container. Yeah, it just has a name. It's not going to, we're not going to hard code a value inside this. Why? Because we want the supervisor node to dynamically update the values inside this empty container that we are declaring. So I'm going to have two empty containers. I'm going to call one as next worker, and the other empty container that I'm going to create is called worker instructions. Yeah, so as you can infer from the name, why am I naming it this way is because, again, this is going to, the values for these two empty variables are going to be populated by the supervisor node dynamically once we start the workflow. So the supervisor controls who is the next worker. Is it the researcher? Or is it is it the reviewer? Do we already have some first pass contents? Do I activate the reviewer? And so the supervisor node decides that. So that's why there is this particular variable number one. The second variable is where the supervisor is going to give instructions to the individual workers. Like, okay, if the supervisor calls researcher, then what does the researcher needs to do, right? So that's basically going to be inside this variable. So right now inside the start node, this is all we need to do. I just declare two empty variables, and then let's actually move out of this node. Okay. Now it's time to actually add. Now what you're going to see in action is actually these different, kind of this whole team that's going to come together. So first hire that I'm going to have for my multi-agent system is the supervisor node, which we have to heavily configure. So let's start with that. Now again, to kind of have you see the end-to-end workflow and an output within the time window that we have, I'm actually going to stick to just LLM nodes. So I'm going to add a node here, and I'm going to search for LLM. Yeah. So why LLM node and why not this other thing called agent? So earlier you saw agent. Yeah. So that would be an exercise for you to kind of, build the muscle after you see this base foundational workflow creation. So again, with agent, you can actually stretch the capabilities to connect to external tools. So right now, the nodes that I'm using are LLM nodes, meaning they don't have the capability to connect to external data. But what they're very good is at generation, is at text generation. So they are going to leverage on their training knowledge, and they're going to be still able to do a solid job on giving us amazing contents. So again, to have this workflow realized in a short amount of time, we will stick with LLM nodes for now. So let me go in and configure this. So I'm going to rename this node to be representative, not as LLM0. Let me call this supervisor. Yeah. And then I tick this so that the name sticks. Okay. And over here, you have to actually have API. You need to give it a model. So what I have enabled beforehand is Anthropic. Now, I will also give you on the comment section, I'll also give you the link if you're keen to use Anthropic, or you can also use OpenAI. There's a lot of large language model choices you have here. So if you want the Anthropic API, I'll drop the link later on comments where you can actually go and get and set up. You have to minimum $5. You have to put $5 in, and then you can actually get the API key. So I already have my setup done. So I'm going to just select that. And for the first time, when you come to the flow, you would have to click on create new and then give it any free text name for the API itself, and then your key, which you need to get from the Anthropic platform. So you would have to go to this place, claude.com platform API. And then once you sign in, you will actually be able to grab API keys. So again, I'll drop these links later. I have my API ready, so I'm just going to select it from here. And for the supervisor, I'm going to use a kind of a better reasoning model. So you can go for Opus, but that's maybe an overkill for this particular case. So I'm just going to stick with Sonnet. Haiku is the most lightweight in Claude model offerings. So it also eats lesser tokens, and so it costs lesser. Anyway, this whole workflow is like, it just costs like barely some cents only. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to drop the temperature for this supervisor node as well, because in an LLM context, the lower the temperature, the more deterministic the output. I want the supervisor to be able to have, not so random. When I tell it, please pick only from researcher, or your copywriter or your reviewer, I needed to exactly do that and not go about creatively changing things. So a lower temperature helps with forcing that, reducing randomness. So that's why I'm setting it over here. So nothing else to set there. Now, important in, if you've kind of been listening to all of our webinar series, we keep talking about system prompts every time. So I'm going to set that here for the supervisor node. So I go here to the messages, add messages, system. So for a system prompt, you set it to a system role. And then I have some prompt pre-configured here. Yeah, so let me just paste that in. Okay, so let me just zoom in on this. So again, with the system prompt, I'm doing what we always communicate about system prompts. It helps to set a particular persona. It gives an overall guide to what is the role of this particular AI node that we're adding. What do we need it to do at a high level? Yeah, so I'm telling it you're digital marketing supervisor. You're actually managing a content creation team. So who is in your team? So these are basically all, I'm going to create worker nodes shortly. You have a researcher, you have a copywriter, you have a reviewer. And so the final one, which is actually the campaign output, will just be a finishing node. So once all of these are done, the polished output will be out. Yeah. So other simple instructions I'm giving here as the system prompt to the supervisor are, okay, given the user's request and based on the conversation context and history so far, I need the supervisor to decide who's the best worker node to act, right, at any given point in time. So provide instructions, actionable instructions for that worker. And so when the marketing content is complete and it's actually ready to go, just basically end the workflow. Yeah. So be strategic and minimize unnecessary steps actually helps us with our token limit as well, so that it doesn't go about, overkilling and then calling the workers unnecessarily. So these help to kind of plug those areas. So let me just save this. And so the system prompt part is done. Yeah, so in Flowise, by default, in the LLM nodes as well as the agent nodes, the memory is enabled, which simply means that it allows these nodes to have context of everything that's basically going on in the workflow. So we will leave that on. We're not going to touch that. Yeah, so some other important things that we need to configure here for the supervisor node are as follows. Yeah, so earlier, here I mentioned, again, all of these technical enablers, right? We have already taken care of memory enablement, which we are going to do across our other worker nodes shortly as well. The next thing I want to do is now, earlier in the start node, if you recall, I created two empty variables, who's going to be the next worker and what is their job. Right now, if you recall, I mentioned the supervisor node is the one that makes those calls. I have to wire, the start node with the supervisor node. Now, before that, let me just exit this and then let me actually connect these two nodes. Yeah. So it's just a drag from here and drop it here. And I can go back and let me just complete this configuration now. So two things I'm going to do. First thing, I'm going to, again, create that structured output for the supervisor node. Why? Because I need to restrict it to only pick from the workers we have on hand and not give its own creative outputs. So let me just add. So I'm going to add two JSON structured outputs over here. The first one is what I'm going to call, next worker. And then the second one is, again, so these names, I've kept them purposely the same as what you saw earlier created in the flow state in the start node, right? So because we're just linking everything up, like just connecting the dots one beside the other. So yeah, so the next worker, and so this is going to be a list. So for that, we're going to select this data type of enum, an enumerated list. So it's just going to be a numbered list in simple terms of worker number one being researcher, worker number two being, your copywriter, worker number three is your reviewer, and so on. Yeah. So let me just put that here. So I have this here. So the finish is the proxy for the campaign output to see the final polished output. And we'll give a description, just for readability. And so next worker, basically, when the supervisor, makes a call on who's the next worker, it's going to be a choice from just these workers. So these are the same as what you saw here. And it's going to be who, what's the role, what's the value of this particular, why do we have this particular variable, or why is the supervisor, choosing is basically who's going to act next, who's going to go next in the workflow, and what are they going to do? That is going to be in this part over here. So this can be free text. So I'm just going to select as a string data type. And over here, the instruction is going to be the specific subtask instructions for the next worker, right? So this is who is going to act next amongst this, or this, yeah, worker. And then what are they going to do? So that's essentially what we have configured here. And of course, the connection now. So if you notice here, there's an update flow state. Every decision that the supervisor makes, yeah, at any point in the workflow, later when I call upon the chat and then I tell it, okay, create my LinkedIn post for me, the supervisor goes about making a sequence of decisions. So the first thing the supervisor decides is, let me call the researcher. Now that decision needs to go and be written into that empty container, the empty variables that we created earlier in the start node. So I need to create that link, and that's done in this section in the update flow state. So let me just add, yeah. So over here, again, what we're going to do in this particular case. Okay, you can only see two options over here because I've already connected the start node to the supervisor node, right? So it gives me the two empty containers that I have that now can be populated with the outputs coming from the supervisor node. So I just select next worker here, yeah, and then I'll add another flow state and then select the second one, the worker instruction. So again, these two were empty earlier in the start node. Now I can actually get it to dynamically hold every single call from the supervisor. Who's the next worker? I can get the start node to actually hold those values. What do they need to do? I can get the start node variables to also hold those values. Now, how do I do that? In Flowise, we use these double curly braces to open up this menu of all the variables that we have access to within this workflow. Yeah. So as you can see here, what we want to grab from is this node outputs. So this simply means that I'm going to take this node output.net next worker, meaning the supervisor node's output. So when the supervisor decides at a point in the workflow, the next worker is going to be the researcher. That has to go and sit or get written into that empty container so that it is available throughout the flow. So what we're doing is we're just trying to move from a local variable to a global variable, and global variables are something that can be accessed by the entire workflow. So to create that link, I simply select this, and then over here, I am going to do the same thing again. Yeah, so instructions. Okay, so that's it. We have actually configured everything that we need for the supervisor node. So let's actually move out. And next, move on. We actually need to build these worker nodes one by one. Yeah. Now, we can't directly start building the worker nodes directly after the supervisor node. I need to have a traffic, kind of a traffic light flow here. I need to have a router. So for that, I add this node called a condition node. Now, for those of you listening, if you're familiar with programming, and we have this conditional logic, if else, pretty much that's what we're trying to do over here. So this condition node is basically how we're going to configure it is with one, if it's going to be researcher, if it's going to be the other two nodes, the writer or the reviewer, else path is just going to be the finish with the final output. So let's configure this. Again, to configure, I double click, I change this to a more representative name. I'm going to call it check next worker. All right. And then over here, so we have to, again, do something similar to what you saw happening in the supervisor node earlier in terms of the configuration. I'm going to add a couple of conditions here. So 1, 2, and 3. Why 3? Because I need to take care of 1, 2, 3. And then again, like I said, this will be the if, this is the elif number 1, elif number 2, and then this is the else path. So this is my conditional routing. And so how do I take care? Again, in conditional logic, you have the clauses are one thing, and then you need to start writing the conditions itself. So let's do that one by one. So again, I want to be able to access the variables within this workflow. So I do the double bracket, as you can see here. Yeah, so the first thing we need to do over here is let me go to the access. Now I'm scrolling through because I just want to see all the variables that I have available. I go all the way down to actually grab from the flow state, right? Because I want to be able to route to the respective workers based on who the supervisor wanted to activate next. Yeah, so earlier we connected the supervisor's output to the flow state. Now I can actually grab from that flow state because these are the global variables that are available throughout the workflow. So let me start by grabbing this. Yeah, so next worker. Now equal to, so this basically has to align exactly with how we declared the list in the supervisor node. So if you remember, I had the researcher first. Yeah, so I'm going to select this as researcher. Now the same thing here. I go back and grab the next worker who was the copywriter. Okay. And then the next again, or the last is actually the reviewer. So this is all we need to do right now. Okay. The last one. So once I actually configure that, you'll actually see 4 paths coming out. So the last one, we will configure it to the campaign output. So let me just move this a bit to the side. And let's start adding the LLM nodes to, finish up the rest of the workers for our researcher, copywriter, brand reviewer, and so on. So let me actually start by adding those nodes. Okay. So we're just going to configure one and then we can actually copy paste. We can duplicate it, thankfully. So right now, let me go in and rename this to be the market researcher. All right. And I'm going to quickly select my model, just like I did before, my Anthropic API. I'm going to select a less, intensive model for this case, a smaller model, Haiku. So only thing I'm going to add, 2 things I'm going to add over here. The configuration is not as complex as the supervisor node. System prompt is definitely something I want to set for the worker nodes as well. So I have those ready. All right. So again, it's focusing on telling each of the worker node who they are and what they need to do. Yeah. The one key thing I'll highlight here is that, every single system prompt for the workers has this at the end. Follow the instructions from the supervisor. Yeah. So the other thing that I want to do is where's the instructions? So I'm going to put it over here. Okay. So supervisor. So this is the input message that's going to go into each of the worker nodes. So again, I'm going to be able to access this global variables and pass the worker instructions, right? So this is again the global variable that is holding the specific instruction from the supervisor. And I am actually passing that as the input to the worker nodes, right? So that's all we need to do for the worker node number 1, the market researcher. So I'm going to connect the first path to the researcher. Now, I mentioned that, in an actual team, in the workflow, I mentioned you actually want to go back to report to the supervisor on what did you do so that the supervisor can make the next decision, whether the research was good enough. Let's move on to the next stage and actually create some output, some post out of the research. But in Flowise, you can't really go back and do this kind of a connection. So for that, you actually have this loop, which is the last technical enabler I captured on my slide. So I'm going to connect it and configure this real quick. Okay, so loop to supervisor. Okay, so just lock this name in. And here we have a choice of who to loop to, who to actually pass the output from this particular worker node, which is the supervisor. So I simply selected from the dropdown, and I'm not going to change anything else. The maximum loop count is simply going to control how many times you're allowing the back and forth to happen. That's all. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to duplicate this and quickly just change the system prompt for each of the other worker nodes that we wanted to have. All right. So let me just arrange them real quick here. And let me just go in and rename this node to be the copywriter. Okay. And not updating any of this, I would simply update the system prompt because each of them are actually doing they have different roles and responsibilities. So the way you control that is through the system prompt. Yeah. So copywriter, again, so you create engaging contents, right? So if you remember, I mentioned everybody has to follow instructions from the supervisor. Nothing else to change. So moving on, the next, this will be the reviewer, the brand reviewer node. So let me just quickly update that. All right, and quickly update the system prompt as well. Okay, so this is done. I'm not doing any control S or saving here. It's all auto saved. And the last node, which is our campaign output node. Okay, and then simply update its prompt, which is to, based on the entire conversation, right? So based on the entire conversation, produce the final output, right? Yeah. So it has to take care of where the user is asking to post and then create a targeted platform post. So let me just save this. All right. Okay. So let's connect from the router to each of this. Okay. And then let's duplicate this. Okay. So each of this worker node has to report back to the supervisor. Yeah. So none of this is changing. So let me just duplicate again. All right. So this one doesn't need to report back to the supervisor because it's the final output. So that will just be produced on the chat. Okay. So let me just do a save here. And we will give this a quick go. We'll give it a quick test now. Okay. So let me just copy my demo prompt. So to chat with your workflow, you simply go and select this chat option here. And then you actually get the flow asking you how to help. So let me just paste what I wanted it to do for me. So create a LinkedIn post promoting a digital marketing summit happening at so and so date, so and so target audience. It needs to include early bird promotion and a compelling call to action. Yeah. So let's send this and see what happens. Now you can actually see the flow working here on the left, right? So you can see it actually activating each of the nodes. So the supervisor first got the researcher to work, right? So if I actually expand this, you'll actually see that happening live. Yeah. So once the researcher gives an output, it'll be reported back to the supervisor node. Then the supervisor, see, so loop back to the supervisor. Then the supervisor is thinking, okay, is the output good enough? Can we move on to the copywriter to create the contents? So, yep, so the output was good enough. Supervisor was happy. So now the copywriter is working on creating some contents from what the researcher gathered and then back to the supervisor. Supervisor will then, yeah, activated the reviewer to check for CTA, effectiveness. Is it good for the platform that we're going to post on and everything? So once that is good, you should finally actually see the polished post here. Now, again, there's a lot of ways that you can actually, extend this flow. You can connect an email node to the campaign output and have that output emailed to you. So you can see the post being created live. Yeah. So with all the hashtags and everything, yeah. So let me just expand this so you can actually see it happening. So it created the post with the hashtags and all, register for early bird pricing. So it's very, LinkedIn friendly. It looks very much like, a post out of LinkedIn. And as you can see here, the process flow, right? So it actually went through each of the nodes, right? So you can actually see it went through the entire workflow that we created. And again, so if you were to look at, at any one point, so because of the setup that we did, the next worker was called with a particular bunch of instructions. And then, your researcher gathered some intel and so on, right? So the entire flow actually came together to actually give you that final output. Yeah. Okay, so very quickly, you can actually extend this workflow by doing a couple of things. Like you can actually change the researcher from an LLM to be an agent node, where you can actually connect it to external tools to do Google search and web scraping. I've connected it to Tavily API here. That's this logo. I can also give you the link to that on the comments later. You have to give one of the tools you want to include is current date time, because otherwise these tools are still in 2024 when they were last trained on. If you connect them to the latest date time, which is also a tool, they would be able to pull latest content for you. So this spider is a web scraper. So whatever Tavily API searches, so it's just a Google search like SERP API, there's Tavily API. The web scraper will actually go and scoop the contents. Everything else remains the same. So this is one thing that you can definitely do immediately after you've built the base LLM flow to kind of extend on the workflow that I just shared. Now, in a sense of time, let me just go back. Hopefully you found that helpful. Please come back to the video and try it again and then extend it like I shared. With that, actually, let me go to the last slide so we can wrap this up. So again, today, what you saw, again, thanks to those who are still staying beyond 7:30. So the key takeaways, again, is that, the goal of these multi-agent systems are to mimic how work happens in a real business setting with a central orchestrator delegating dedicated tasks to different worker nodes and then consolidating it all together, creating a very polished output. We created everything without any code at all, simply drag and drop. So that's the power of agentic AI tools today, N8N, Flowise, all great. Now, whatever I just showed, you can actually use it easily. Instead of a LinkedIn post, you can just change the prompts, and then you can have other, possible outputs like, flyers, ad copies, and so on and so forth. You can even use it for non-marketing scenarios as well. Now, if I go back to check my API use on Anthropic, what I just ran will not even be 5 cents. So it really is very cost effective. Yeah. So yeah, on that note, again, I'll be dropping you links. You should already know where to find Exaltius courses. That's on Exaltius Academy. I'll drop you links to Flowise, to Anthropic API, Tavily API, and all those stuff that I talked about in this sharing. And yeah, with that, we'll end this webinar. Thank you so much for joining. Do come back next Wednesday for another interesting topic. Thank you. Bye.